For those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Nick Haase. I'm one of the co-founders here at MaintainX. I've been working closely with a lot of Fortune 500s and on their digital transformation strategies. You may have, if you've been to any of field events or trade shows, you may have seen me on the MaintainX team. Currently lead our community, and I'm super excited to be here. But I'm really excited to introduce our next guest here, or our guest today, Jake Hall. So, Jake, go ahead and tell the folks here who you are.
Yeah. Well, I'm Jake Hall. I go by another name where more people might be familiar with online called the Manufacturing Millennial. I created a brand where focusing on how do we advocate manufacturing to the next generation of workers, and then how do we embrace the future of technology, automation to drive production forward. So over that time, I've been in the industry for 20 years. Started off as a broom boy shop kid, working and sweeping the floors at a manufacturing company when I was in high school, but I've had the opportunity to tour hundreds and hundreds of manufacturing facilities over the past couple of years. And I've been following on social media where I get to advocate and talk about manufacturing every single day. So if you're on LinkedIn, check me out on LinkedIn, the Manufacturing Millennial or Jake Hall. And I hope to give you guys insights around what future technology, tools, automation, topics around AI are going to be impacting your business. And of course, I'm a big Chicago Cubs fan as well.
There you go. Gotta get the plug in. And yeah, if you haven't followed Jake on social media before, or maybe you might have seen some of his content's really fun. It's I think he's one of the best in the game. He posts a lot of really fun robot videos. You do these. It's never. I think you're one of the folks that really think about, is someone going to regret wasting time watching my video? Every second to be action packed, information packed. And so Jake does a great job. So definitely check him out if you're having if we have the distinct privilege of introducing you to him for the first time today.
Yeah. So I want to make things exciting, unlike the 2025 St. Louis Cardinals baseball season. I see more St. Louis stuff popping up in the chat, so I'm watching you guys. There you go, David. Yeah, I remember. Nice seeing you again as well. Great to see you again. Tooling you. But yeah, a lot of fun discussions happening.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the screen share here because we're going to talk for a little while, and if we need to pull it back up later, we can do that. So, Jake, in simple terms for folks here, let's start from the ground up. What is AI?
Yeah. Man, AI can be so many different things. And I think it's one of those things where there's often a broad term that embraces the words AI. And it can be everything from generative AI to what we see within ChatGPT, right? Everyone's on ChatGPT. Like just yesterday, the cloud service for ChatGPT went down. So you couldn't use Canva, you couldn't use Spotify. I think LinkedIn was down for a little bit. All of a sudden, I'm finding out how much I'm using AI in my daily life now. And AI is what I would classify it in the simplest terms. It's a tool and a piece of software that allows us to look at a massive amount of data and be able to create predictions, recommendations, and decisions off of an enormous amount of data to make our lives easier. I really think, and there's a bunch of different ways that you could be using AI today, but I think in the simplest terms, AI is a software or a tool that can look at a lot of things and help us quantify to make easier decisions moving forward. And it's such an exciting time right now that we're seeing in the manufacturing space that's allowing us to use AI as a tool.
Totally. And I think it's like if you've ever been at a one of those house party games. I feel like I've seen this on a sitcom more than real life, but you get those couples that are completing each other's sentences. It's because they're kind of predicting what the next person's going to say. And AI is kind of helping to do that prediction in real time and really, really accurately these days. And if I always try to think, like, if you were to explain AI to like a technician on a shop floor and how it could help how it might change the way their work is going to look over the next few years. What is it? How do you kind of look at it through that lens?
Yeah, man, I look at AI is the legend on the manufacturing floor that has been there for 45 years. And he can just listen to the shop floor. He can walk up to a machine and look at what's happening and be able to tell you if the machine's running at speed, if there's going to be a issue down the road in the next hour where you're gonna start getting part scrap because something minute is changing. AI is that individual who's been on the floor for 40 years, who has an immense amount of tribal knowledge to help you react and make decisions quickly and to better understand what your production is. I look at AI is only as good as the data and information that's available for it to understand and act upon. And I look at the 40-year-old the guy who's been in the industry for 40 years working on those equipment. He's that individual that can help you make decisions. That's what AI is. And AI can present itself in many different forms of understanding, but I think what AI is doing is it's taking data information that's all over the place, that's coming from a bunch of siloed machines and equipment, and hopefully giving you a better direction and understanding on how to make actions and decisions. I think it's one of those things where it's an individual that can hopefully inform you on how to better improve your production.
I think it's well put, and I forgot to warn folks, do not play a drinking game today of every time we say AI, you take a shot, you will be dead before the end of this webinar.
Yeah.
Just fair warning, but it is an AI presentation, and people are talking about it right now. I see a lot of companies talking about it, but a lot of them are struggling to start or struggling to get things kind of into a space where they're like, yes, this is working. What? Tell me, like, why do you think there's that disconnect? I think when you put it that way, everybody wants that. Who says no to buying that tool or getting it into production? What is the kind of disconnect there?
I think what we need to do is, before we talk about where we're going, I think we should talk about where we've been. And I think that's going to give a much better understanding of why AI matters more than ever on the manufacturing floor. We talked a little bit about this in Wrench Factor. So if you heard it before, we're going to reiterate some stuff. If you haven't heard it, we'll try and get a link going back to Wrench Factor with a discussion that we had earlier, Nick. But when it comes to information on the manufacturing floor, data for so long has only been accessible if you have the right networks and infrastructure in place to get information from your equipment. For a long time, you had a sensor on the floor, and that sensor was then connected to a PLC, which would be turning a piece of equipment on or off. Or you would have a photo eye that will let you know every single time a product was produced and it went in a conveyor to be dropped in a bin, and you're waiting for 150 of those to then move that box, tape it up, and ship it to a customer. But a lot of times that photo eye wasn't doing necessarily any counting. It was simply just triggering another action on your piece of equipment. Then you would, if you wanted to have some more information, then you would have a SCADA system, connected to that PLC that was getting tags to create a higher level of infrastructure and understanding on the floor. Above that, you might have a MES, where all of a sudden you're able to make much larger decisions across the floor. And then from that, it's connected to an ERP. And then from that, you have some stuff up here happening in the cloud, really high up. So you have all these levels of information that you've had to have. Fast forward to the world of now, it's really easy to buy a device for $100 that can connect right to the internet. And that internet connects right to a cloud service or system that is plugged into an AI model that allows me then to make actions and decisions. So all of a sudden, what we're finding out in the manufacturing space is no longer do we have to have this pyramid or Purdue model that has all these different levels and layers in the manufacturing floor to be able to create real-time and decisions. I can skip right from a sensor on the manufacturing floor or a motor or a vibration sensor that allows us to be able to then create real-time decisions. And that's where I'm seeing now with what we're seeing in the world of AI. So now what AI is allowing organizations to do is to be able to implement and create projects at a very fast rate. So all of a sudden, we can go out there and in a very, what I would say, fast initiative, we can understand what downtime looks like on a machine, being able to simply just hook up a sensor and letting us know when that machine's running or not running. Be able to look at the scrap, determining what is the OEE of that we're running on the thing, or for scheduling issues. All of a sudden, we can monitor 15 pieces of equipment on the floor and to figure out what's the production of each one of these equipment and how can that better create scheduling for us. It's taking what once was a ton of work and infrastructure that needed to be built up between the OT and the IT and the shop floor and the operations team and the maintenance team, and be able to stream all that line up to create some really fun, interesting applications.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I guess so. Should I? What should folks do about this? Should they just call ChatGPT hotline and say, "Hey, apply this to the factory"? Like, what's sort of the first step you take to get kind of, to a place where you can start to implement AI and actually start to see find it. Where do you drop the pebble?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things too where I I I love and this might be this is going to come in two answers. The first one that I always talk to companies about is if you want to start using AI, go to a trade show, go to a conference, go talk to people who are already doing this, or have some level of um, experience in deploying these solutions and systems. I think in the world of information now, it's one of those things where you can go online and you could look at a case study that's probably already published and deployed by an end user or a manufacturer, which is probably pretty close to what you want to do. And you can then see, for example, like one thing I love about what your page does on MaintainX is I can go out there and I can look at whether it's food or automotive or tier one or tier two or these or utilities
Right.
or services. It's one of those things where I can go out there and I can figure out, okay, I want to I have a production floor and I simply want to try and get a better understanding of I have a bunch of equipment that was shipped to me overseas. I have
Hmm.
no user manuals on it. I have zero instructions on what that looks like. I could then all of a sudden go out there and hopefully begin to create some information or timeline that's going to help me build up a predictive maintenance model on my production floor. Or I can go out there and I can simply say, hey, I have a machine that is producing I'll use this as an example. I made a fidget spinner for my daughter on a 3D printer. That's producing 1,000 3D fidget spinners per shift, and all of a sudden I'm now only making 900. Why am I making 900? To be able to simply look at some data to make those decisions, I think is a great point. Where do you start? You really start by talking to people who've been in this in the industry before. We're in a world now in the manufacturing space, which I absolutely love. 15 years ago, everyone tried to take anything they learn and hold it close to them and not show anyone what's going on. You walk to a conference or a trade show today, and people are very upfront with sharing what they've learned and how they're moving forward, and to be able to learn from those experiences. I I I am a massive proponent of ask questions, find out what they're doing, and that's really where you start. Find a
Right.
champion who's done this before and ask about what
Yeah.
they've learned and what they would have done differently.
I love that. Makes sense. And so it's something you go try to find access, talk to peers that have tried this. Start with where you have data, and if you don't have data, try to figure out what you should do without it. I guess asking ChatGPT, you don't need to give it sensitive information if you're on a free plan, but you can still start to get some like baseline understanding of, I have this old equipment or this that I don't have a manual for. Manufacturer's out of business. What do I do? So wherever you are with your data journey, if you've got a lot of data, start trying to work backwards from there, and figure out where the pain is. Like, what would you make better tomorrow if you could, and maybe apply that.
And
It-
it's
it-
so
yeah,
it's so easy to get data these days. Like that's the entire thing. Like it's so easy just to plug in parallel with the system to pull some tags and to be able to collect very quickly information. I still question why companies, it was a manufacturer on the floor that made like you remember in school, right? It was like it was like the 4 ounce or the 8 ounce milk cartons, that you had to
yeah.
bend open and flip out, and then it made like, what I'm
Huh.
talking about. So there
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
company that was printing and making those down in
Okay.
like Kalamazoo, Michigan. And on the end of every single line, they had a whiteboard that had the black electrical tape that was making a grid pattern, and they would
Yep.
have first shift, second shift, third shift, the times, the list of the operators, parts produced, downtime, number of errors, air numbers, comments. And
Yeah.
like it blew my mind in a world today where I can get pretty much all that information by either dialing directly into when I have a stack light that's turning green or red,
Mhm.
or punching in and plugging a serial or Ethernet cord in the back of that PLC and just getting some tags to collect information. And like that's the world that we can plug into now. But like it's the same thing where then I walk over to the maintenance area and I see sticky note walls. Remember that? You ever been into an area where you
Oh, yeah.
walk into the crib or into the maintenance area, and typically it's that that corner area that has the door that has the glass with like the chain wire that like is going through the
Yep.
doors, and it's kind of creepy. But then you walk in there and then it's just a sticky note wall. Got something to fix, throw it on a sticky note. Like it blows my mind that we're in the 21st century. My daughter can access information and learning on her iPad, who
Yeah.
is 5 years old, and yet we're then still in multi-million-dollar production facilities. We're still using sticky notes to do our scheduling, to do our learning, to do our communication.
Yeah.
That's kind of where those things. That's where we're seeing those issues at.
Big sticky note lobby, man. They're
Yeah,
powerful. You can't just get rid of sticky notes. Well, I
exactly.
think it kind of touches on part of my next question, which is like, what's the mindset set shift that leaders need to make? And it sounds like if you see these antiquated analog kind of things happening in your operation, second guess them at the very least.
Yeah.
Try to challenge your team to figure out how could we maybe not do these sticky notes, these whiteboards manually all the time. Is that kind of
You know,
the yeah
I think the mindset around manufacturing is, excuse me, around AI and manufacturing is a lot of people feel that it has to encompass the entire ecosystem of what's happening on the manufacturing floor. People think in order to jump into AI, it has to be everything, rather than it could be something. And I think a lot of times um there's a couple mindsets um that I caution people about. The first one is the complete mindset of FOMO, where you feel like everyone's doing something, so therefore you feel you need to do everything to keep up in line rather than being strategic on what it's doing. And then the other inverse of that mindset is people feel that they're doing everything, so they know you hear a lot of stories about it not being successful. So therefore you just say, I'm gonna wait until more development happens rather than jumping on it right away. Here's my philosophy when it comes to AI. You're on a train station, and I'm here in Grand Rapids. I'm going to hop on the Amtrak, and I want to go downtown to Chicago, hop on the red line, and then go see a Chicago Cubs game in the most beautiful stadium in the MLB, Wrigley Field, home of the 2016 World Series winners. Anyways, so we do that, and you can go and you can go and you can go up to the train station, you could buy a ticket, you get on the train, you sit down, and then you're enjoying the train ride. Right, it's still at the station, you're comfortable. But if you miss that train, then I have to drive down to Kalamazoo. If I miss that, I have to drive down to Michigan City to hop on the next one. The longer you wait to get on that train, the more hectic your schedule is going to be, the more stressful you're going to be to try and catch up to it. It's the same world in AI. We're right now at your main train station. You have the opportunity to buy a ticket, get on for really cheap, and enjoy the ride as that train begins to speed up to get to its final destination. If you're a manufacturing company who wants to wait, you could still get on the train, but it's gonna be a lot more difficult to find the seat that you want to get on when you're later. So my analogy that I'm going for is AI is going to be like a train leaving the train station. You can get on right now, and it's going to be a low cost investment. You can schedule your time around what you want to do. Or once that train station leaves, and all of a sudden all these other manufacturers around you are already in their seats that they want to see on the journey, it's going to take more energy for you because you're going to have to run. You're going to have to then find, another place to get on board. You're going to have to find people who left your company because they simply went to another company that was embracing automation technology at a higher rate. So they said, well, I want to be a part of change rather than that doing the status quo that our manufacturing company has done for the last 40 years. It's going to be harder for a company to embrace that. And that's what I view with where we're at with that mindset. Go to the train station, buy a ticket, get on board. You don't need to do everything at once, but as that train is moving and you're in that seat, the great part about it is that server is going to bring you snacks. They're going to bring you drinks as you're sitting down, which are going to be better and better and better until you get to Wrigley Field and have, a Chicago dog. I hope that made sense from that mentality mindset, but
yeah, I know. I mean, I think I think that directionally you're spot on. I think it is one of those where the folks who start to play with it today are going to get exponentially further ahead, have less friction in their lives. I'm a big believer that if you don't start, the companies that have a future are the ones that embrace AI and figure out how to use it. The ones that don't are simply going to get overrun. And so the sooner you can start to build that culture and that kind of foundational understanding of how it can help, and to be clear, it can help. And want to kind of pick your brain on some examples you've seen lately that are pretty cool. Of like, so for the folks who have gotten on the train, they're having the snack. What's the what are some of the cool, like, what's some of the real world value and experience, like, examples that you're seeing kind of work today?
There's a lot. And it's funny to see how these small case studies are just popping up all over the place. One was simply just machine scheduling. People were able to go up there and they were able to look at like 14 different pieces of equipment, and they were able to identify a couple operators that seem to have on average a 10 to 15% higher OEE on the piece of equipment that they were running that day. And they found out, they were able to track down to that specific worker, why was that worker doing why was that worker driving a higher productivity on whatever piece of equipment that they were running compared to workers that didn't. And it was one of those things where you look at it, it's like, it seems very trivial, right? Wouldn't you be able to know what workers were most efficient when it came to productivity? But a lot of people's don't, because they go out there. A lot of times the workers will lie, on what production's out there. They'll put all that data on a whiteboard, but then gets written down on a piece of paper, which then goes back into a room where it gets uploaded into an Excel, which then all of a sudden gets put into a graph, and you look at it at the end of each month. Like, that right there is what I call, it's dead data. It's data that you collected, but it's data that's completely no longer actionable. What this company was able to do is they were able to look at what workers were doing productivity per machine, and they were able to go up to that worker, and they were able to find out that that worker was just doing a couple tweaks when they went in and they set up that machine, how they set up their area, how they set up their assembly area, when they were going out there, how he set up his production area. And they were able to say, why are you so much doing? Well, when this machine is running, I simply run this part over here. So when this is running, it's running in parallel with this. Well, they didn't realize that the instruction manual that they wrote said not to do that, but then they found out that the person
experienced guys were maybe trying that approach.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden they were able to replicate the productivity of that individual to 10 other workers. And like
I find that so many of these use cases are like they're in the examples I've seen that are providing tremendous value, by the way, or a lot of times things that theoretically you could probably do. Anyone who's worked there long enough could actually go and do themselves if they had all the time in the world to sit and focus all their energy on that singular problem. But no one has that kind of bandwidth, and that's where when the AI with the data can actually help you get to that root cause, or at least directionally close enough to where you can put a pretty big dent in the problem. And that's where I think some of the misconceptions sometimes lie from folks who are still trying to figure this out. Is they think it's like this genie in a bottle that's going to suddenly know what to do. And it's just about what you put into it. And if you can find those good data streams and get those early use cases to sort of knock them out, it can really change your bottom line pretty quickly in some interesting ways. It's about, go ahead.
I want to highlight, right, when we look at manufacturing across the board here in the United States, at least, I know we have a couple of people up in Canada. Those numbers are pretty much in parallel with these stats, but like 98% of the manufacturers here in the United States are classified as a small to medium-sized business. Although small to medium-sized businesses, which are like anywhere from 10 to 20 to 50 to the middle size, which is 500, a lot of times you don't have people who are dedicated to the digital transformation and the explore teams to bring on technology. A lot of times you have a floor manager or production manager who's not only important in charge of scheduling and maintenance and the HR, right? There's a person that wears so many different hats. Being able to go out there and create an AI initiative is a lot more time consuming, and I guess you could say risk focused than a larger company who's able to create teams to deploy automation. And that's the big thing. Like when I focus on where do you start and where's the mindset, don't do anything big. Go out there and find those things that you can address that almost seem to the point where it's trivial. And then when you have AI look at that information, it's incredible that the decisions and recommendations that it could be that it can make. And that's the big thing as well. AI tools and software are not the end all be all thing that's out there. I view AI as another individual who's sitting around a leadership team or a production team and saying, hey, let's hear from Sarah. Let's hear from Nick. Let's hear from Jake. Let's hear from Mike. Now let's hear from our AI tools and solutions and hear what their recommendations are. I think it's one of those things that that allows you to make a lot better decisions.
%. Yeah. I know, like, one question, I hear a lot as well, and this is, I think, speaks to some of that underlying fear around it, is we're seeing the news quite a bit that companies are laying people off because they're trying to do more AI. It doesn't need, Amazon just laid 14,000 people off. Mm-hmm. And part of that riff was associated with this, came with commentary around how they're hoping to use AI to become more streamlined. And so some people are very reasonably maybe saying, I don't know if I want to bring in the tool that's going to take my job. But I know you've had a lot of talk tracks that AI is not going to replace people. I mean, especially in manufacturing.
Listen, manufacturing, like it's one of those things we're hearing AI doing stuff and replacing. I'm gonna tell two stories. The first one is before AI, we heard robots we're going to, and Tom, I like your, Tom, I'll make a comment about it later, but let me finish my story, Tom. I like your comment. You know, before AI, we heard robots were going to take all the jobs in manufacturing. And I am truly a firm believer that AI is what robots are, what create competitive advantages for manufacturers to still stay competitive in a global economy. There's a manufacturer in Michigan, about 25 miles southeast of where I live in GR. And they're a machine shop of, I think, 20 employees ish. They were a large supplier to Denso, Bosch, and a couple of other tier 2, tier 3 automotive companies, and a couple of electric companies as well. They were doing a job for years, and then that job was sent out for pricing again to figure out what it would look like. And they got feedback from the procurement team saying, "Hey, FYI, we might not be able to work with you because we're finding out overseas we can get these parts manufactured for about 30% the cost of, for about, 30% off of what you guys are making it for." And that was scary for them because that was millions of dollars in business every year that they were getting. The owner talked to the son, who was on their first robotics team in high school. And he mentioned this, and the kid said to his dad, "It says, well, we just did a tour of a local manufacturer, and they have cobots doing machine tending, where you can set up a rig or a rack of parts, and now all of a sudden you can run these parts throughout the night." And they were able to go out there, and they were able to deploy 3 machine tending systems that allow them to then run an extra 6 hours on each machine per night. And they were able to then keep that business because the owner was able to justify the cost of these robots over the next 5 years that this program will be running, and they were able to keep the local business. If that company was no longer able if that company was not able to implement robots, those jobs would have been lost because they would have lost millions of dollars in business from the supplier, from that specific supplier, which would have been outsourced overseas. Those robots saved local jobs. It sent younger kids into training, and it allowed the generation who was a machinist to now become a robot programmer. And all of a sudden we created higher value, higher skilled. And here's the thing. And then all of a sudden they were then able to bid more jobs because that equipment was able to do more production now. And so now all of a sudden since that, they've put in 2 more robots. And that was about 2.5 years ago. So look at the scaling. This company is growing because they turn to automation and robotics rather than fearing it's going to happen. And it's one of those things where I forgot who said this. It could have even been, and keep in mind, it's coming from that individual. But I met Jensen in Washington, D.C., who was the founder, the CEO of NVIDIA. And he made a really good point, and I very much agree with him. He says, AI isn't going to take jobs. The companies who use AI will take your jobs. And I think it's one of those things where it's great to the point of we can have the mindset where we don't want to embrace automation because we have a fear of what it's going to do. But you need to understand the mindset as leaders in your organization. AI is what's going to be the next competitive frontier. And the sooner that you embrace that technology, the sooner that you will have the competitive advantage over the other companies. And it's one of those things. Everyone's turning to innovate. The companies out there who were still faxing over quotes were not winning the ones that were getting emailed.
Right.
There's
going to be 3 million open jobs in manufacturing alone by 2030.
Yeah.
I think if anything, that's the, siren that says we've got to figure out how to be more efficient. Not we've got to figure out how to, because there's not enough people going into the trades right now to kind of backfill the labor shortage that we have in these spaces. So I think AI is going to, like you said, it's the superpower that's required for you to be able to be sustainable and successful.
Yeah.
And that's part of where it's like, how can leaders help teams trust AI when it's new and they've done things the same for years? To your point, it's like you've got to do this to be able to keep your business running and give it a chance to grow. Otherwise, you're just going to get flattened by the companies that are taking it on, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so you got 90 days to show impact with an AI project. You're dropped into like Sim style, plucked into a into a factory. What do you do? And where do you start? And how would you kind of think about measuring success?
Oh man. 90 days to do it. I look at it one of those things where um if you want to be successful, you need to have a goal in mind. And in order to be successful, you have to have the culture and the mindset in order to win. If you don't have, first of all, if you don't have leadership on board, if you don't have management on board, the projects aren't going to be successful regardless of what you decide to do. But where I start when it comes to that is um
That low hanging fruit. Where's
yeah,
the
you know,
opportunity there that
look at what we talked about earlier. Look where that data already exists on your manufacturing floor.
yeah,
A lot of times when we create initiative through these digital transformations in the structures, I talked to Remus on Wrench
yeah.
Factor. You talked to him briefly as well. I think when you were at the ICC conference out in California earlier this year. When we go to these digital transformations, people have all these great ambitions on what they want to do with their data and how they want to set the production. But he says one of the most underlooked at things when it comes to is your maintenance, your predictive maintenance, your CMMS. I mean, obviously we're on a MaintainX call today as well and all that. But I truly believe when I was helping deploy all these smart manufacturing solutions when I was at my job before I started with LinkedIn, it's a low hanging fruit that already has people involved, that already has you already have a pretty good understanding of what production looks like on the floor already. And I think it's one of those things where you as an organization, individual can get a pretty good understanding of how do we make it so our machines are reducing on downtime 5% less. And is it going out there and is it setting up a new predictive maintenance model? Is it going up there and simply understanding where is our machine simply not running at high production for OEE because we don't have the parts available or because we don't have the right skill sets? Being able to go out there and create a 90-day initiative that allows you to simply set a very basic, here's my goal, here's what we're looking for. And the biggest thing I want to say for that is you need to define what the results that you're looking for are. Oftentimes people create an initiative and they never actually set like what they want to look at. There's a great quote out there by Winston Churchill, and he said, this was back in the 1940s. He said, however beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. And I think it's such a great quote because we often get so caught up with doing the latest technology, creating the latest initiatives. Are we actually being successful with what we're doing? And that's where you start with that 90 days. Define the results that you want to see and what you want to look for, or not necessarily like, hey, we want to reach 85% OEE and we're currently at 65%. That's not what I'm looking for definition. What you want to define is how are we going to specifically see if these actions and initiatives that we're putting in place are going to change our OEE or our productivity. That's what you shoot for.
I completely agree. I'll talk to customer or folks who are various. Part of it is where are you on that digital maturity model, that reliability maturity model, and I'll go to some folks who have lost a lot of the institutional knowledge because they've raged out, they've left, whatever's happened, and so the first step for your AI strategy may be to leverage AI tools to help you efficiently build those SOPs like you were talking about at the beginning,
Yeah.
because now we can start to standardize some work and put processes in place that will give us the tools to then go and measure in the future. If you're further along on that curve and you've got some of that data, those are great places to start to, figure out how do we optimize or learn from the data that we have. And I think you're spot on that you got to just keep breaking it down. It's almost like the 5 whys. Why are we doing this? Why are we
Yes.
doing it? Why? Because if you try to look at it too high of a level, it's really difficult to actually. You don't want it to be a subjective win.
Yeah.
You really want to try to
100%.
make it a data driven win that gives folks some belief and trust and faith that things are going in the right direction. That gives you the momentum you need to kind of move things further along.
So
Yeah,
we have a few minutes left, and I want to save
yeah,
some time for this because for me, I enjoy being on a lot of shows, and I kind of want to put it back on you, Nick. I
yeah,
want you to share a little bit about what we're seeing the MaintainX side doing around AI, right? You guys have been doing a lot of really cool stuff when it
yeah.
comes to CMMS. Where do you see the future, or what is the future roadmap that I guess MaintainX is doing when it comes to AI features that you're putting in place? And I guess before we go into that, why do you think why do you think AI is so important to what maintenance and CMMS is doing for manufacturers?
Yeah. It's a fair question. So like the baseline value you get from using a CMMS like MaintainX, really any of this, if it's being widely adopted by your team, is you get the lifeblood of AI, which is data,
Mhm.
right? And it's very clear, it's not controversial to say that it's a good idea if you're running a business to become more data driven.
Yeah.
So the baseline value is that if you're capturing that data, then we can start to do something really interesting with it. Again, now as we're starting to leverage AI more in the MaintainX world and in the product, it gives us this great opportunity to say, hey, now that we have all of this data, let's kind of build this seamless backend, you know, out of sight, so to speak. It's
Mhm.
not in your face. You don't have to learn new skills. It's very much part of the organic native experience opportunity to teach people, to show people insights when they're doing the work itself and
Yeah.
help surface the insights and recommendations. So that may be a technician who's in the middle of a preventive maintenance inspection and you see something wrong. Having the ability to instantly kind of ask Copilot, ask a question with your voice or type it in, say, take a picture, say, hey, what do I do now? And being able to immediately extract information from manuals, from past work of what's been done, surface the things that, again, if that technician had all the time in the world
Yeah.
to sit and focus only on that, they could do it themselves, no problem. But if we can pull that information directly for them and extract it, it doesn't really matter to them if it's magic or if it's AI, as long as it's correct
Yeah.
and it saves them time and lets them go home safe and get the work done efficiently. That's a big victory for everybody, right? So our goal is, we're going to be doing a lot of things that sound really um, advanced and scientific in the back end, in the background. That our goal is to make it seem really intuitive and simple for whether it's that frontline technician or it's the administrator that's trying to do something a little more sophisticated. Maybe it's a reliability engineer trying to understand why is our equipment breaking down? How do we get uh, do some root cause analysis on this more intelligently, or it's a continuous improvement persona that's trying to figure out what do we do to get better tomorrow. A
Yeah.
manager trying to figure out how to save money. Where can we tighten the screws? Where are we bleeding cash?
Did,
Um, yeah,
did you ever going back, you remember Popeye the Sailor Man?
of course. Yeah,
Popeye, right? I view, right, Popeye ran into issues every single episode. And for a long time he would go out there and he'd run into a person and he'd
yeah.
get in an accident, the boat was sinking or something, and he was getting overwhelmed. He was about to lose. And then what does he do? He opens up a can of
That's
what?
spinach.
Spinach, right?
That's spinach, right?
What instead of spinach, we're opening up a can of data. And
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, Popeye AI is able to grab that data, and then
yeah,
all of a sudden he turns superhuman. He gets incredible strength, he gets
yeah,
incredible speed, and he's able to go out and save the day. You know, I'm 36 years old, so I'm stepping back in time a little bit. You know, I'm aging myself. I know there's a lot more older people on here, like Tom, who's living in the Cardinals era of Cardinals winning World Series way before I was even born. I mean, you can't like leverage something over that when they never had a Jake Hall to cheer on for those. You know, hey, congratulations beating the New York Yankees back in 1926. What was it like, in the Great Depression back then, Tom? But but what I'm going for here is that what we're seeing is data is able to take, like you were saying, Nick, data was able to go out there and to be able to create a superhuman decision making, where oftentimes, yeah, Popeye had 10 other friends involved. He could have made it happen, but he didn't. So he turned to data, he turned to spinach, and that made him successful.
Love it. No, that's great. I want to get to a couple of the questions here in the chat,
Yeah.
um, in the Q&A here real quick. And Chris asked, does AI pull info from the internet or just information you've given it? It depends. So with MaintainX, if you're using the AI inside of our product, it does not go and pull from the internet. It pulls from the internet's not always the greatest place to look for, the safest trusted source of truth for
Yeah.
information specific to your operation. So from the perspective of helping technicians troubleshoot, we're going to try to steer towards past work. We've also got a model that's trained relatively conservatively, meaning that it's not going to tell you the craziest way to fix something. So it can give you some good directional advice, but it'll also pull from manuals and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that works today.
It can do
Yeah.
both. It can do both, right? You can build a model that is a source of truth specifically to your data and what's happening on the manufacturing floor, or there's a value to also getting information across the board as well.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I really like when I'm going on ChatGPT and I look at something and there's a little link where you can then check the sources. I love it because a
Mhm.
lot of times I'll pull up like a Reddit thread on
Yeah.
like, hey, here's a problem. And I remember like when I was out there, we were working on some stuff, we're working on some PLCs and trying to figure that stuff out. You would pop up there and all of a sudden there's a person who took a picture of a PLC with an error code or something. And then you have
Yeah.
5 other PLC guys walking on there and walking you through the entire thing. There's values for both where that data and how you set up that model comes from.
100%. And sort of the way we're seeing like the future of this is like is that it's very much what we call this agent model. And again, this isn't a word you've got to become an expert in. A lot of this is going to be kind of seamless behind the scenes, but we found that the AI that you train really like this around very tight objectives or small, very detailed in depth, but narrow training use cases
Mhm.
end up being better. And so what happens is you have like basically this series of this broad AI that sits over top of it and just goes and consults these expert little AI agents to help you solve some of the whatever it is that you're trying to query. And so one of the next questions from Siando was, you know, the increasing maturity of AI,
Yeah.
Copilot, machine learning. Like, what specific features are we developing to integrate AI into maintenance planning? Like, how will we leverage AI to move beyond scheduled maintenance to offer truly predictive planning? Um, that's going to be through what we're building, this agentic approach, where we're going to have elements of Copilot that are specifically trained on understanding time estimates around how long individuals take and work takes by categorization, and as well as agents that kind of understand what goes into solving a problem, agents that understand what your production schedule is doing and going and looking at that. And so that's part of where our roadmap is very much directionally going, is to try to figure out how do we take these special AI agents to go and help you get clean, simple answers to help you do better resource allocation. And so again, it won't be confusing from the front end. You're not going to have to again learn a whole bunch of new terms. It's going to be as simple as help me plan my schedule for the week. What should I be worried about? The normal human questions, but then we'll be able to kind of in the background have these little agent helpers go in and kind of solve some of those tasks. And so that's how we're going to be helping your organizations become more AI driven without necessarily requiring you to get a PhD and understanding all these new buzzwords and lingo and figure out a whole new way to use the product. If that's the case, then we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then let's see, we got a question again. Do you have any existing examples of AI and maintenance? Like, what are companies doing with it right now? I mean, the simple thing, is using it to help, reduce friction, to pull answers to technicians while they're doing the work. How do I repair this? Who worked on it last? Something that, if your team was doing a really good job of leaving work order notes in previous work, you got to go back and still figure out which work order it was in, pull it out. So that's one way that you just get, and that's one of those things that, okay, now how much time and value is that really saving? Well, if every minute of your, figure out how much an hour of downtime costs in your operation. If we can take it from the technician taking 30 minutes to fix something down to 15, then you've just saved, 25% of that hourly cost on downtime, right? Because now you're back up and running and making machines, or making widgets again, or you're getting something done quicker that will allow you to go and take care of more preventive maintenance tasks that will prevent the next catastrophic downtime because you're able to stay ahead of it. So those are some of the ways that we're seeing it. Jake, I'll throw it to you if you've got any fun examples you've seen lately, whether it's maintenance or otherwise, that you're seeing, easy things down the middle for people to understand.
I think it's that's such a great little thing. Like, there's I have a little device that I use to monitor at my cottage,
Yeah.
and it's a device that goes on my furnace, and it will let me know when my furnace is turning on and off. And it's a
Yeah.
simple app that I have on my phone. But like, on there, it has a notification where it's using AI, where basically it's saying, hey, this is with the recommendation that we will let you know when you should replace your air filter on your furnace because of how many times it's ran, and the
Right.
recommendation of the filter and like the amount of hours that should be running for that. Like, I know, listen, you could change your filter every 6 months or whatever. Like, I know you're supposed to do that, but it's one of those things for me where I think what I really want to nail home is the simplification that AI is allowing us to create actionable decisions on is so different than what it was 24 months ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Man, it's crazy how easy it is to be able to just set something up and run with it, and it's a plug and play. Like, you don't need to have an engineer on your team who's has 20 years of experience to be able to successfully deploy an AI solution.
I think the point of that too is, like, play with the sillier use cases too, because I don't know if any of you all watching have ever gone and studied calculus in school, or, geometry, but they don't throw the calculate the area of this octagon at you as question one, right? It's like, let's figure out how much, area, what the area of a square is, or, do the basic simple stuff first. And some of those early examples and problem sets help you uncover, you get familiar enough with these tools to be able to start to ask the harder questions and do
Yep.
some of the harder use cases. So yeah, that's I think a good way to sort of put a bow on the session today. Um, if anyone else has any other questions, if anyone wants to throw any more digs at the Chicago Cubs, you've got a few more seconds
Bring it
here.
on.
So, but without further ado, I will. I do want to try to keep everybody on time today the best we can. So, quick plug here: if you haven't had a chance to check out our academy or our community, definitely check those out. We've got a link here. Join the community, keep the conversation going. We've got a lot of folks there happy to help answer questions, and you can schedule some time to speak with an expert here at MaintainX as well. Thank you all so much for being here. Excited. Let us know what you think in the comments, and appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much, Jake. Paul, for being a guest.
Always great to be on as well. Of course, go Cups, and hopefully I'll see a lot of these people, at the 2026 trade shows as well. I really, my takeaway from this is go to in-person events, go and talk to people, find out what they're doing successfully, and find out how you can duplicate that on your manufacturing floor.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jake, and thank you all again for attending.